The major difference is the customer is not always the user. That is something that we take for granted in the consumer space.
Hi everyone, thanks for tuning into Notes of Design. To help support our mission spread knowledge, we have a very special guest on today's episode. Let's welcome Amit Patil. Amit is a UX professional and he has an experience of over 13 years. Currently, he manages a team of designers around workplace intelligence in Microsoft. Previously, he had worked with companies like Honeywell Aerospace, IBM and other couple of startups. He's also an alumnus of NID Gandhinagar and he's also been an engineer in his earlier career. Also presently a visiting faculty at NID Bangalore and a member of board of studies at MIT Design Pune. While trying his hands at publishing few patents and papers, his interest lies in applying towards a research in this industry. On this episode, we discussed about designing for enterprises. We spoke about what are the various terms and nomenclatures that are used in an enterprise design level, and also we focused on the process that one must follow while designing for enterprise applications, along with pointing the differences on how different enterprise application is from traditional B2C application. In the end, we discussed on the various challenges that are involved in while designing for enterprise level application. Hope you guys enjoy this episode, and on every Friday we release a new episode with a new creative leader around the world to help you understand different topics related to design. So don't forget to tune in into Notes of Design on every Friday. Said with that, happy designing everyone. Hi Amit, welcome to Notes of Design. It's a pleasure hosting you today on our show.
Hi there. I'm really glad to be on this show. It's really nice to hear so many amazing speakers previously, and it's an honor to be on the show.
Thank you so much, Amit. So how's your day going, Amit?
The day has been the same. I think across the world, we're all facing similar reality. But it's been great so far.
Thank you, Amit. So if you could give a brief about yourself to our audience out there.
A brief about myself. So I'm Amit Patil. I'm a UX professional for around 13 years now. I currently manage a team of designers for a product called Workplace Intelligence in Microsoft. And yes, previously I worked in different spaces. I worked in Honeywell Aerospace. I worked in IBM and multiple startups as such. So yes, I'm a designer. I'm a thinker, and many times I'm a doer first. So I graduated from NID Gandhinagar. I've been an engineer before that, and it has been a crazy career. And I also have the opportunity now to go back and teach at NID Bangalore and MIT Design. So I think that's something that I'm really excited about.
Thank you so much, Amit, for giving a great intro about yourself. So let's start with your journey into design. How did you start, and what are your tips to the beginners out there?
So yeah, the journey has been always exciting. In fact, when I was actually sitting back as a young engineer in a company as a software tester, I was always wondering, is this what I'm going to do all my life? I didn't really know if that's going to be the way ahead. And I was given this additional responsibility to work on user interfaces. And back in college, I used to do a lot of graphic design, posters, and things like that. While on the job, they gave me this additional option to work on extra work around user interfaces, and that got exciting. So I started applying to places and applied to this place which had a lovely course on software and user interface design, and got selected for the interviews. And that's when I realized that place was a pretty famous college called National Institute of Design. So it was a pretty shocking thing for me. Okay, I got through for the interview level. In fact, I didn't even know that I'd be getting through further ahead. But there was always a design, if I were to say design bug inside me, wanting to make things better. And I think that's how it started. And as I move on, I think in NIT itself, I changed my perspective of design. I used to think design as a more of a surface level thing, but then I started realizing it's more in depth, and you actually have opportunity to change people's lives as such. I did my internship at HP Labs with gesture-based technology. That was exciting. Back then, there was no such thing as I think Nintendo Wii was the only gesture-based thing around. And it moved on to me passing out sort of graduating during 2008 crisis. So I can correlate with everybody right now who's graduating. Tried to do a startup, tried to go to Japan for another internship, and then started working with Opera Mobile and worked there for a few on the browser. We also had worked on browsers for the Nintendo Wii. And then from there, I actually moved on to IBM. IBM was a pretty huge organization to work for. And I think it was exciting there as well. I was an information architect there. I worked on the intranet of IBM. Moving from there, I went to Honeywell Aerospace, and from aerospace, which was a long tenure working on aerospace experiences. Now I am in Microsoft working on AI-based stuff. So yeah, and the tip that you mentioned, like frankly speaking, I feel the only tip that I can give to beginners is follow your instinct. Everybody has their own ways to grow. There's no formula for growth. So don't try to copy everybody else's formula. Everybody has their own circumstances, situations through which they learn. And on that, I would say that learn from the opportunities that you get. Take every opportunity that comes your way. Don't try to be excessively choosy. Sometimes when you are excessively choosy, you lose out on something that is going to teach you. Finally, I will say whatever you design with deep empathy and creativity. I think that is critical, even if you're doing enterprise design. And we'll get to know more as we talk.
Thank you so much, Amit, for taking us through such a brilliant journey, and it's really inspiring. So on today's topic, like as you worked with all the big level major enterprises designing for enterprising solutions. So we're going to discuss about designing for enterprise today. So what is enterprise application and how different is it from designing for an ordinary applications that we have right?
Yeah, I think this is a big question, and a lot of people are trying to find the answer for it. I would rather put it in layman's term of enterprise applications are applications that you use at work. If I were to put it from like everybody's perspective, you use at work in large organizations, mid-sized organizations, and this could range from HR management software to you filing your expenses, even managing the whole airlines for aircraft maintenance space, or even something as simple as Office, Word, Excel, PowerPoint. And you also use them in enterprise context. If you see, primarily enterprise applications are the ones which are focused around the organization's needs, not around just the individual's needs, because each organization has a purpose and it has a business to run. And how do we then make sure that that business is done appropriately? Anything from handling people management to internal external collaboration, or even inventories, like business processes, inventories. I think business intelligence, predictability, everything comes under enterprise applications. When comparing it with normal applications, or if I were to say when comparing it with consumer applications, is that one of the major differences, the customer is not always the user. And I think that is something that we take for granted in the consumer space, because the user gets to discover it, the user gets to buy it if it's valuable. But in enterprise applications, the one who's buying the application, or sort of who's the customer, is the organization. And the organization chooses on your behalf, because as I told you, organizations have a goal and a need, and that is satisfied primarily by enterprise applications. So that's one difference, major difference, and hence the experience around it is pretty different as such. And I think in my experience, it has both pros and cons around that. I mean, pros, of course, you make the user use what you are designing, but I think the con is around just making sure that these applications don't get imposed upon. I think another major learning that I've had around IBM or designing for IBM or enterprise applications as such, I think there is this whole thing of complexity of organizations. Organizations are extremely complex, and each organization has its unique flavor, right? As in, enterprises are phased out in different historical perspectives or different products that they release and so on. So this application or enterprise applications are the ones which are sort of embedded within the organizational culture, and hence have multiple roles. Sometimes you have to design for multiple roles, and you can't just start by designing a screen. It starts with a systemic perspective of thinking of around the whole system first, and then going down to the individual user as such. I would say, when you're designing for these tools, delight is a factor, but most probably the task accuracy and completion of the task at hand becomes very important, because if you're not able to do that within your enterprise tool, then the chances are that the core value of your enterprise tool is going to go down. So So for example, in a cockpit, if a person is busy wanting some good amount of delight or have fun around it, and not worried about landing it accurately, then you know what's going to happen. Even for like analysts, the delight factor is critical, but how do you actually get insights out of it is critical. And on that note, I would also like to say that when you're designing enterprise applications, you have to respect the roles that exist in organizations, because everybody has good amount of expertise in their space. Hence, you have to respect the role, is what I would say.
Thank you so much, Amit, for explaining us in detail the enterprise application. So, what is the process that you follow while designing for these applications, as user mental models and behavioral patterns are entirely different when compared to B2C applications?
Yes, that's again a gold mine to answer. I think, as I said earlier, there's no formula for success in a career, and I think there is no fixed formula for way of working in the design space. But I think, irrespective of the space in which you go into, understand, design, and evaluate remains a standard process. And how do we actually then customize that for different spaces, different domains, makes a big difference. So one important aspect I would say is, for particularly enterprise space, is understanding the domain. And I think understanding the domain is very critical depending on the domain of the application. Say, for example, you're making an enterprise application for finance domain, or for aircraft domain, for general business domain as such. You have to understand how it works, how are the tools actually being used currently, what are the other tools around. And this kind of initial study or inquiry is very critical before you get down hands-on to designing. And I think that level of understanding is helping you to design an experience that fits into the fabric of the organization, rather than being a new headache over the existing set of things that employees already have. And it becomes like, okay, now there's one more new tool left to learn. So you have to take care of those aspects. I know multiple companies buy multiple tools from different vendors. So balancing that also becomes important, because every company has their own ways of designing their space as such. And I think another part around it is, like I said, that the expertise of that individual. So making sure that the expertise of that individual around personas, identifying where they work, which context they work in. Sometimes people don't just sit in AC offices. Sometimes people are sitting on a tarmac, or somebody is sitting back office, or somebody is sitting in a front office. So when you actually look at those different contexts, they actually vary the usage and the way in which you structure the experience around. And finally, I would say, once you actually have the design ready, which is a complex job by itself, because there are a lot of feature richness around enterprise applications, which you have to cut down, or even make sure that the right features are showcased in the right places. But finally, validation. In the validation space, I think enterprise applications tend to not do much of validation, because of the reason that it can be imposed upon. But I feel it becomes a designer's responsibility to make sure that we validate these experiences with the right users, because not just with the customers, but with the end user as such. Because most of these, if they are not fitting in well, they lose the company as well as the product a lot of face value as such. So it's very easy to enforce your application, but very difficult to actually get it right for the right organization. So I think that part is very. Finally, I will also add one more element to it that is ignored in the enterprise application, is the visual aesthetics. Unfortunately, most enterprise applications today look horrendous or bad or ugly. And the reason for that is this enforcement mindset that, we'll anyways enforce it to the organization, so we don't care. But it does affect the work culture. So what happens is, when you actually do not have a high degree of aesthetics, or not even high degree, I would say it's the standard required hygiene of aesthetics, then the individuals tend to work in a particular fashion, delay their time sheets and things like that, and due to which a different culture is created. So aesthetics plays a big role in creating good organizational software or enterprise software.
Thank you so much, Amit. So, what are the various challenges that we face while designing for enterprise level applications?
Yes, so I think it's pretty challenging to be in the enterprise space. It looks like a very easy job, but it's very difficult, primarily because identifying the difference between how things should work versus how they actually are in the organization. So what I mean by that is the difference between the policy or the rules made by the organization versus how individuals in the organizations work with their existing tools. If you are able to crack the difference between that, you can actually fit in your enterprise experience very well. Many times you're customizing these white labeled softwares of yours, your company's software, and pushing them into the enterprise space. And that's when you actually need to be very sure about the existing ecosystem around it. Like, for example, when I was working for IBM and I was working on the internet of IBM, the biggest challenge for me was identify the complexity. So IBM is a company across multiple countries, multiple domains, locales. So identifying the uniqueness of the internet across all countries at the same time, try to filter out and try to create a commonality across it. It's very challenging. So be prepared to work in Excel sheets for 1 year, 1 month, or 2 months. As a designer, you should not shy away from doing such things because information architecture is something not at just visually good looking screens, but also at a very top conceptual level of understanding the organizational structure and so on. So if you really love that level of thinking, I think this is the best place. Another major challenge in enterprise space is the feature richness. I think most enterprise applications have so many features inside an app that you actually are always struggling because I'm sure most of you have heard of this whole idea of everything is important. Trust me, everything is not important. You have to find out as a designer what is important, what is not. It's almost like putting 30 bullet points in a slideshow and saying that, hey, I want to present everything at the same time. Interaction techniques like, progressive disclosure, or even that's the reason I mentioned about information architecture, good amount of information architecture. And I would say all your skills, your interface design skills, your information design skill, and your interaction design skills, they all tested to their limits in the space of enterprise applications as such.
Thank you so much, Amit. So, on a concluding note, I would like to ask you to recommend any of your 3 favorite books to our listeners out there.
Books, yeah, I love books. And in fact, this is another thing I'm glad you're putting in the show because a lot of designers stay away from books, and I think that's not a good thing. Books can teach you a lot, and if you don't want to read, please listen to audiobooks. The books that I would recommend are The Human Interface by Jeff Raskin. It's a pretty old book, but it has very basics of interface and interaction design. And the way he writes about cognitive attention and so on is brilliant. So I would really recommend that. The second one is The Design Way. Design Way is something, it's a book which has actually phased out my way of working in design. It's actually forms a very philosophy or theory of design as such. So if you're interested in that space, The Design Way by Harold Nelson and Eric Stockelman is brilliant. In fact, both of these authors are very responsive on LinkedIn. So if you want to reach out to them, you can do that as well. And the third book, which I love, is Rework. It's by the founders of 37 Signals, Jason Fried, David Hansen. If you really want to think about work from a very slightly different perspective, I think this is the book to read. And it actually is very short read, so you can read one chapter.
Thank you so much, Amit, for giving us your time and joining us to spread knowledge.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure and I think an honor to be on this show. And all the best to everybody. You know, man.